Today is a very important day. Today is when House Bill 1317, the culmination of hours and hours of work, comes before its first committee here in the House. As many of you probably don't know, I've been in the legislature since 2015. In 2015, I had my first exposure from friends in the industry, from parents who have had kids impacted by high-potency concentrates reach out to me and say, what is the Colorado legislature going to do about some of the negative impacts that we're seeing from teen use of high-potency concentrates? Since then, the legislature has done some, but not enough work to help cut down on looping, on diversion into high school campuses, into the widespread teen use of what has changed from when I was in high school to where we find ourselves today. The hours of work have been with a diverse group of stakeholders, including members from the industry, including members from the parent groups who care so deeply about this issue, with a diverse group of legislators. A bipartisan group of legislators are here behind me, which shows the importance of what we're doing today. We're trying to do three simple things through House Bill 1317. Because the federal government hasn't legalized marijuana, there has not been enough research on the impact of high-potency products on the developing brain. The NIH and the FDA have not taken their rightful place at the head of research the way they should have been. That will change with the passage of House Bill 1317, and Colorado will take its rightful place at the front of public health research through the School of Public Health. The second thing that we're going to close are the loopholes of looping, individuals being able to go and buy 40 grams of high-potency concentrate from every dispensary that they can get to before the close of business, and the concern that those products are then being peddled through a black market on high school campuses across Colorado. Our bill is thoughtful, it is bipartisan, it is forward-thinking, and it's a blueprint for the rest of the states across the country who are grappling with the pros and cons of legalizing marijuana. I appreciate the work from the industry. I appreciate the work and insight from the patients and from the parents. This is the Colorado solution. This is how Colorado solves big problems. Thank you so much for being here. We have a great list of speakers, and I look forward to answering any questions that you have after we get through our speakers. With that, I want to introduce LAFONNA Pacheco to come forward and share her story.
So good afternoon, and I thank you all for coming here today. I am but a concerned mom, and I'm lucky that I have my child standing here with me today. Thank you. I want to tell you about my experience with the high-potency cannabis, our family's experience, our friends' experience, the community that we were involved in before it hit us like a semi-truck crossing the street. The damage I see that this caused our family, all the circles that we believe in as an advocate, as a social worker, the toll that I seen in my work that it took on the families walking in the community with the caseloads that I had, I could not understand, I could not believe that it was happening. I still never expected it to happen to my family. By the time my daughter was 17 years old, I hardly recognized her. She was once vibrant, beautiful, involved, couldn't wait to get busloads of people in, dances, missionary trips. She just had it all planned out. Once it became clear to me that her friends and the people that would start to introduce to her THC, potency, dabbing, flower, the various names that as a parent I had no book to go by. I began to understand I was up against something. I didn't have a book, I didn't understand, and I never expected it. She became distant, she isolated herself, and it was almost like she was under a spell of addiction. Seeing the change in her behavior with her friends, with her involvement, people saying that were her close friends saying that it was not like she was on THC, but it was like she was on another form, crack, other things, the way that it affected her life and her mind. She was smoking the THC concentrates. These products are not a flower. They don't grow out of the ground. Instead, they are lab-created drugs. Through much research, through much circles of families, parents that called crying, we rallied together as a community, not knowing how or what to do. We were never against the medicinal piece for the people that needed it, genuinely needed it, but the piece where they targeted us as parents. See, I'm a parent, and I had my daughter's best interest at heart. She had a thriving environment, but other people did not have her best interest at heart. They told her that it was a force for good, for the money that it was bringing in. We seen a different circle. The community changed, parents got together and created our own support groups trying to figure out what to do. The lab-created drugs designed were so potent, we did not understand. By the time we sought treatment, my daughter's experiencing psychosis. After 5 stints of rehab, recovery, still paying off to this day, I'm proud to say that my daughter has been clean for a year. And I am so proud of her, and I am here waving the flag, and I'm tired of my children, my family. I'm a circle. You're all connected to me. I'm connected to you. Our children being used as sacrificial lambs in the wrong hands of the wrong people without any regulations, without any responsibility. The question that remains, however, is one that the bill seeks to address. Why is it so easy for underage children to obtain these drugs? Why are infants going to the emergency rooms? Why are floorboards being torn up and plants and butane with kids that don't have a high school diploma getting hurt? And what are we going to do about it to fix it? This bill contains provisions which make it more difficult for these potent drugs to be diverted into the gray market and sold to middle and high school students who are too young to legally obtain them. By reducing the daily purchase of the limit from the 28 grams to 8 grams, this bill will cut down on the ability of the gray market dealers to produce products in bulk and then resell them. Similarly, strengthening the seed to sale tracking system will cut off, finally, hopefully, praying, believing, the ability of dealers to circumvent the daily purchase limit by hopping from one dispensary to another. Has to be. Everything else has limits, regulations, protocols, follow-throughs. We need this. We're not going to have a community. We're not going to have a future. Together, these provisions will lead to a decline in the amount of drugs diverted into the market and sold to our children, our youth, the ones we love. My story is only one of 1,000 today of similar stories in the state. Thousands of children are being sold this product, shared personally from my daughter. Peer pressure, it's like pushing the ocean back with a broom. Thousands of parents are watching in horror as their children descend in psychosis. Me being morally, I pray we get together. We are here today, we're moving, we're taking action. I have no ill feelings against anybody, but the ones that are not considering what's going on with the potency, the regulations, and the wave of destruction. I am thankful in closing every day that my daughter survived this ordeal. And my hope is that the passage of this bill will help many others survive as well. More than that, my hope is that the passage of this bill will save future families from having to endure the pain at all that we endured for 5 years. I never dropped my end of the rope. I never left her in the places, the things I've seen. You've only got a snapshot. I give my sincere thanks to the bill and the sponsors and the advocates. Oh my gosh, so many of you here today who made this happen. This work can save lives. And I'm waving the flag for our families. And I ask for you to do the same. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Chris Rogers, and to be clear, I am not anti-marijuana. I do not support prohibition or criminalization of marijuana in Colorado. I do, however, support reasonable regulations to put a halt to unsafe practices that sacrifice the lives of Coloradans for reckless profit. And today, we're here to support House Bill 1317, which will take a powerful step towards this goal. First off, I'd like to thank Speaker Garnett and Representative Caraveo, as well as Senators Lundeen and Hansen for sponsoring this important bill. It's not always easy to work on sensible legislation regarding cannabis in Colorado, and I applaud their leadership and service. I'm the Medical Director of Child and Adolescent Services at the Medical Center of Aurora, the largely non-publicly owned psychiatric hospital in the state. Here I'm an inpatient psychiatrist with a front row seat to the emerging epidemic of cannabis abuse and addiction that threatens to swallow the lives of a whole generation of Coloradans. On our adult inpatient unit, it's hard to keep count of the number of psychotic and suicidal patients that are admitted with THC on board. And regardless of the data or clear evidence of how cannabis contributes to their illness, person after person refuses to accept that marijuana could be bad for them. How could it be? They've been taught to believe this is a harmless plant, a medicine that is good for anything from headaches to cancer to anxiety. It's natural, without side effects, without risk of addiction. This is the lie that is ruining the lives of far too many people in our state. The story on our adolescent unit is even more tragic, as we repeatedly treat kids too psychotic to know what's real, who they can trust, or where they are. The rates of adolescent psychosis have grown steadily since legalization, and in almost every single case is linked to the use of high THC potency concentrates. Products known as dabs, or wax or shatter, that are made in a lab by distilling down the most psychoactive component of the marijuana plant and concentrating it into what is better described as a hard drug than the weed people voted for in Amendment 64. Kids as young as 11 or 12 are using blowtorches and glass rigs to smoke these highly addictive and harmful chemicals, sometimes every night just to go to sleep. We have very little research to try and understand what this does to the developing brain, but as any child psychiatrist who treats these kids can tell you, we don't need a randomized control trial to see how dangerous and often tragic the effects are. We do know there's a clear risk between developing depression or even committing suicide related to earlier age of first use, as well as the potency of products. This means a 12-year-old trying a marijuana concentrate is at far greater risk of developing a mood disorder or even eventually killing themselves than a 30-year-old experimenting with a joint of flower. Unfortunately, it's far too easy for these 12-year-olds to get access to these products, and not from the black market or a shady drug dealer. They're getting them from friends at school or older siblings, many of whom have medical marijuana cards themselves and ready access to as much shatter, dab, or wax as they could ever want. It's time for this to change. House Bill 1317 will provide stronger safeguards to keeping cannabis products out of the hands of Colorado's kids. Having reasonable limits on daily purchases of these highly addictive substances makes good sense. Maintaining adequate guidelines for providers to uphold when recommending cannabis, especially to young kids, is a no-brainer. We need a more robust tracking mechanism to better understand who is using medical cannabis products, how much, and in what form. And Colorado should be leading the way in researching high-potency THC products. We certainly are leading the way in their sales. We have a long way to go to help the kids in my hospital, but House Bill 1317 is a great place to start. The whole country is watching Colorado as other states look to legalize cannabis. Let's lead the country into a sustainable and responsible future we can all be proud of. Thank you. And we're so excited that today the Attorney General Weiser is next up to speak in support of the bill.
As has been discussed, the rise in teenage use of high THC concentration marijuana is a critical public health challenge. It demands action, and it's important what's being done today. It is a model for the nation. Just consider the latest report from the Colorado Department of Health, Public Health and Environment in their Healthy Kids Colorado survey. They surveyed the use of dabbing, which has been discussed, a way of accessing high THC potency. It went from 4.3% of students in 2015 to over 20% in 2019. This is an alarming rise, and this House Bill 1317 represents an important and a critical response to this threat. The Substance Abuse Trend and Response Task Force, which I chair, and Matt Bach, who's with me today, head of our Office of Community Engagement, and is vice chair, has focused on this issue, with leadership from parents, from public health advocates, identifying this troubling trend. This legislation meets that trend and addresses the fact that our medical marijuana laws have enabled teen access to high-potency marijuana. As we in Colorado work to address this public health challenge and refine the regulatory program for overseeing legal cannabis, we need to do so in a way that protects kids. I want to thank all of those here who devoted so much time. We cannot take for granted that we're here today with this bill. Speaker Alec Garnett, whose time is precious, devoted hours upon hours. Representative YADIRA Caraveo, who's the only doctor, I believe, in the Colorado Assembly. Senator Paul Lundeen, there he is. And my state senator, Chris Hansen, all work together. This is an extraordinary result. It represents, as the speaker put it, Colorado collaborative problem solving at its best. They brought together people at the table, from concerned parents, public health leaders, and industry representatives who are committed to developing an evidence-based, thoughtful policy measure. To be sure, there's some areas that, as this process continues, can be improved in how we regulate marijuana. For example, the regulation of high-THC hemp, which is an emerging challenge as well. And our department's going to work with the leaders here to continue to improve this bill and our overall regulation of marijuana. And as we do this work, I want us to celebrate and never take for granted the spirit here. The civic engagement, which is bipartisan, with thoughtful engagement from moms, from industry, from public health representatives. This is how we should be making public policy in this country. This is the model. I thank you all for your work. It's a rare and wonderful thing that I get to be involved in important public health work, back-to-back days with one of Colorado's power couples, the Geitners. So basically, yesterday I was in Colorado Springs with County Commissioner Carrie Geitner talking about the opioid epidemic and her commitment to this. Today we're here talking about high THC access for kids and Representative Geitner's commitment to addressing this issue. Thank you, Representative.
So I'm Representative Tim Geitner, and I just have 2 points that I'd like to make. First, 1317 will make Colorado the first state to really dive in and research the impacts of high-potency marijuana on the developing brain. You see, I have a personal connection to 1317. I have a nephew who journeyed down this path using high-potency products while he was in his early to mid-teen years. And he has since then struggled with the impacts that the mental health piece of this has had on him and on his family, and that continues still today. So I have a very personal connection with this. But I do also want to make one point clear, and that is that there is no desire and my intent to impact families who rely on medical marijuana for the treatment of their children, whether that's through autism, epilepsy, you name it. That is not my intent. In fact, I will work hard to make sure that there is no impact on those families, on those parents. And to Pam and Michelle and Melissa, you have my commitment on that front. And to the others, I appreciate the conversations we've had so far, and I look forward to more of those conversations and making sure that you are able to meet the needs of your children in the capacity that you need, because that is very much a parental rights issue for me. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to turn it over to Senator Priola, who will speak next.
First of all, I want to thank each and every person for coming today to this press conference. I believe House Bill 1317 is one of the more critical pieces of legislation this year at the state capitol. It's personal to me in a way that no other piece of legislation has been in the 13 years I've been down here, in that my wife and I have struggled with our son with high-potency concentrates for going on 4 years. And I won't get into the details, it's a long story. But I have been passing and voting for and against laws on this for years, sitting on the opioid interim committee and struggling with it at home to try to curtail and stop any way we could to get our son back on track. I voted against legalization when it first was on the ballot many years ago because I didn't want the state of Colorado to be a guinea pig, if you will. But I believe with 1317 we will take a leadership role in the country and show the path forward for other states that might be dealing with this in the future. The problem with this psychosis, as we've experienced, is our son is rejecting medical help because he just is not sure about anything. In the years since legalization, Colorado's regulatory framework has failed to keep up with the evolution of the new products. The industry has changed, and we need to catch up with those changes. At the time Colorado legalized medical marijuana, the average potency of the plant was roughly 5%, and high-potency concentrates were hard to come by. Many of these products were not around at the time of legalization, back when my son was like 10, 11, 12. And we have responsibility to do the follow-up work to ensure their safety. The research and the data collected from this bill will help us do that. Colorado's most vulnerable populations are being harmed. High school students report their usual method of using is dabbing concentrates at the rate of 3 times higher than adults. And think about that. That's healthy teenagers. I wish I was a teenager again. I wouldn't have the aches and pains that I do. Healthy teenagers in the prime of their life are dabbing 3 times as much as older folks like us that do have aches and pains and are recovering from many things. The number of vehicle fatalities where marijuana was found to be in the driver's system has increased 135% between 2013 and 2017. So I just want to again thank all the folks involved with this legislation, the many hours of stakeholding and coming together in a bipartisan way to really help protect the youth of Colorado and their mental health. And with that, I'll hand off the mic to Tammy Wolbrick, a registered nurse.
So it's indeed a pleasure for me to be here today to speak on behalf of the Colorado Association of School Nurses. My name is Tammy Wolbrick. I'm a registered nurse in one of the large metro school districts, and I've been working as a high school nurse since the late 1990s. My background is that of an EMT, a certified emergency room nurse, and an EMS instructor. With that history, I usually feel extremely comfortable with any situations that present in my health clinic. However, the unknowns that have been presented with the newer forms and potency of marijuana really do scare me. When I went first into school nursing, the student that was brought to me because of smoking marijuana usually presented with a really strong odor. They had glassy eyes, they had red conjunctiva, and they were usually pretty laid back. Now I have no idea what to expect. A complete assessment is required of each student, and then a decision as to whether we are at the peak of the effects that are being caused, or if the worst is yet to come. Students have come to me crying because they feel like they're having a heart attack. That's usually caused to the fact that they're having chest pain from severe rapid heart rate. I've gone to the student because the teacher cannot rouse him or her to come to the clinic. As a matter of fact, they can't even get them to leave the room after the bell rang. I've been called to the dean's office because the student is in constant motion, argumentative, and yelling for no known reason. I have had crying parents bring their students to me because they're extremely worried about what they're seeing and they don't have a primary care provider, so they start with me. My assessments of these students have revealed heart rates that are sometimes in the 40s to above 200. Now you need to remember that a normal heart rate is usually 60 to 100. Because rapid heart rates are difficult to check at the pulse points, I usually listen avidly. While I'm listening, it's not unusual for me to hear a heartbeat that has what we call an S3 sound. To me, an S3 sound for these kids sounds like their hearts are beating up against the chest wall. There's that much pressure. Occasionally, the heart rate is so irregular that it's difficult to count. I've seen blood pressure readings ranging from 80/60 to 220 over 108. Temperatures may be normal, and frequently they're up above 100. Pupils are often dilated. Students may have horizontal and/or vertical nystagmus. What nystagmus is a vision condition in which the eyes make repetitive, uncontrolled movements, and the student is unable to focus on objects. They also are unable to pass the near-point convergence test, which is a test used to assess if an individual's eyes are able to work together as objects come close to them, or if they begin to have blurry or double vision. Occasionally, the eyes are glassy, and the conjunctiva, which is the mucous membrane that covers the front of the eye and lines the inside of the eyelid, are red. Frequently, the student has hand and possible head tremors, and unsteady gait and slurred loud speech are seen frequently. Initially, I was extremely confused about all the different signs and symptoms I was seeing. What I have learned is that symptoms presentation is dependent on the grade of the marijuana that's been used, the level of the THC that's present, the substances that the marijuana have been mixed with, and the tolerance that that particular student has. The early days of marijuana with THC levels of 2 to 7% are long gone. I've learned to treat these symptoms, make my decisions on my assessment, and that this is one area that I can truly have no expectations. Many of the symptoms that I see are extremely reminiscent to the care that I gave the patients that were suffering from cocaine-induced heart attacks during my emergency department days. I want to make just one final note. Sadly, we've all seen a huge uptick in mental health issues among adolescents in the past several years. I have personally lost several students to suicide. These students have been in therapy and frequently taking antidepressants. During conversations and discussions with them, it's not uncommon at all for them to talk about using marijuana because it makes them feel better. I find it extremely upsetting that my students are combining marijuana with other drugs. I'm also very concerned that they may increase their marijuana use to keep feeling better. Or they may get hold of a marijuana that has an extremely high THC level or that has been mixed with other substances which interfere with their thought process. Any of those combinations may have contributed to the completion of the Suicide Act from the students that I have worked with. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today. On behalf of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education and the 30,000 students and families that we have the honor to serve, I'd like to thank Speaker of the House, Alec Garnett, Representative YADIRA Caraveo, Senators Hansen, Lundeen, and Senator Priola for their sponsorship of House Bill 1317 regulating marijuana concentrates. We know that this bill took months of negotiations. We're very grateful for the bill before us today and the impact that it will have on our students' health. Quite honestly, 18 months ago, I had no idea what shatter or wax were. Like many parents, I had to look them up on the internet, and I'm guessing that a lot of our families here in the state of Colorado are in the same boat. And parents, if you think dabbing is a dance your kids do, you're in the dark. What I found and what I think you'll find as we begin to really look into this as a state was very eye-opening. There's currently no limit to how strong these concentrates can be made. 10 to 20 times stronger than your typical marijuana products. It goes without saying, this is dangerous for our kids. These are serious drugs. Kids have no idea what they're signing up for when they start experimenting with high concentrate THC. I think everyone would agree that these products are not designed for middle and high school students. And we should all be deeply concerned at the rate that they're getting their hands on these products and the impact that they're having on our kids and our families across the state of Colorado. Speaker Garnett cited the Healthy Kids Survey from Colorado. 20% of students have admitted to trying these high concentrate THC products. More and more frequently, our teachers, counselors, and administrators are hearing from parents crying out for our help. Horror stories from families upon families who are literally losing their kids to these high-level concentrates. There's a serious gap in education for both parents and students about how serious these products are. And I'm so happy that this bill will help bring awareness to our community and study the effects that high concentrated THC is having on our kids, their developing brains, and our community at large. We need to close loopholes. And we need to make sure that these loopholes that are closed because they're giving our school-age kids access to these products. We need to take a good, hard look at the research and the actual impacts current laws and regulations are having on our kids here in Colorado. This bill will make us all better informed on what our next steps should be as a state. Thank you again to the leadership of our bill sponsors and to all those advocating on this issue on behalf of the kids of Colorado. It's now my pleasure to introduce Senator Lundeen.
This is Senator Hansen. I am not Senator Lundeen. It is great to be here today. We're just going to switch the order up slightly. A couple of us have bills coming up in committee. I'm Senator Chris Hansen. I'm pleased to represent East and Southeast Denver, and I'm here today to join this group in the effort around 1317. This is an important moment in our state's history around the safe, effective regulation of marijuana. We have a long history of adjusting to conditions. We have a long history of being a leader in this space, and 1317 is in that proud tradition. We have a specific set of issues that you have heard about today that we need to address, and that's what we aim to do with this bill. I also stand here as a parent. In 3 short months, my oldest will start high school at GW. I'm excited for his high school career. I'm excited for his younger brother to follow him a couple years later. We need to make progress on this issue for every high school and middle school student in this state. Right now, there are approximately 300 medical cards for children aged 0 to 17. There are 4,000 medical cards for 18 to 20-year-olds. This bill is going to take scalpel. A very specific look at that situation to make sure that we don't have problems in our state. And we need to have a clear doctor-patient relationship when it comes to marijuana regulation, and I believe 1317 accomplishes that goal. Finally, you've heard mentioned by Speaker Garnett that we are putting forward a program that will create world-class research in this area. The federal government hasn't done its job on this front. It is up to states like Colorado to step in. The CU School of Public Health can do this. They can do it at a world-class level, and we need to rely on the science to make smart public policy, and I believe that's what we're doing here. This is in a proud tradition of Colorado leadership on marijuana regulation, and I'm proud to be part of this effort.
Thank you very much. I'm Paul Lundeen. I'm honored to work on behalf of all the people of Colorado. I'm elected from the 9th Senate District down in El Paso County. Representative Geitner and Senator Priola, or Attorney General Weiser, thank you very much for your comments. Speaker Garnett and Dr. Caraveo, Representative Caraveo, and Senator Hansen, who just spoke, it is my honor to help carry this bill with you. And we do it on behalf of, there was a large group, there are a few still, a large group of students behind us. They are the hope of Colorado, and they are the reason that we are doing this. Colorado was first in the nation to legalize marijuana and recreationally. And it makes sense then that we would also be a state that paves the way for responsible regulation of the high THC products. This bill takes important steps forward to ensure that we are protecting the public health of the citizens of Colorado while considering the realities that this imposes or poses for an industry that is expanding in the state and for the needs of patients. When the voters approved marijuana in our state, it was with the understanding that the state would regulate and tax the products. This is an important step forward to regulating new marijuana products with high THC levels to ensure there are appropriate guardrails and safeguards. We are committed to listening carefully and considering deeply the stakeholder feedback that we are receiving and have received through this process and protecting the needs of patients. It is my conviction that as we finish this process, Colorado will be held up as a model by other states as a leader in the appropriate marijuana regulation. Let's pass this bill so that we can continue to lead the way in ensuring that the public health of Coloradans is at the top of our mind and priorities. Thank you very much.
All right, hello everyone. Like every good doctor, I've been multitasking all afternoon, so. Okay, well, my name is YADIRA Caraveo, and I'm the representative for House District 31. And as a pediatrician, I've treated thousands of children in New Mexico and Colorado. And during those visits, with every single one of those children, we discuss cannabis. My goal with these conversations is to provide the information that my patients need to make healthy life decisions. In fact, we talk about sex, we talk about alcohol, we talk about other substances, and with every single one of them I say, and that includes marijuana. Do you do any drugs, including marijuana? Because it is still a drug. And over the 9 years that I've been a pediatrician in private practice, I've noticed more and more that the young people in my clinic have begun using more of these products, have been using them more regularly, and are using stronger products. They tell me about vaping and dabbing. They tell me about how their friends do this in school many of the times. And the last year alone, I've been involved in the care of 2 different patients who really had serious health effects from the use of these products. One of them, a 16-year-old young man who already had mental health issues and was using these products, I think, to self-medicate, was using them so frequently that these symptoms really got out of control. And we ended up having to send him in to get an inpatient psychiatric hospitalization, not once, but twice, because of the out-of-control symptoms that he was having as a result of these products. Another young woman, 15 years old, great student, athlete, We ended up hospitalizing a couple of times when I left clinic to start the session. She was on her second hospitalization because of frequent use of these products, leading to hyperemesis cannabinoid syndrome and a really rapid weight loss that resulted in her having to go to the hospital because her vomiting was out of control. And so these are cases that we've seen across the state and that I've seen in my daily practice as a pediatrician. Colorado has to exercise its responsibility to update regulations when markets shift and new products arise. Voters tasked the legislature with overseeing a well-regulated industry, including the part of the industry that treats this substance as a medicine. I believe that we must exercise the authority vested in the legislature to close existing gaps in our laws and to extend the standards that exist for conventional medicines to medical marijuana. HB 1317 is a well-crafted bill that will move our regulations towards treating medical marijuana as any other medicine. This bill will require physicians to approve medical marijuana cards and do so alongside specific dosages, conditions, timeframes, and follow-ups, just like I do with any patient in my clinic. It establishes safeguards for adolescent patients and a tracking system similar to those that exist for other medicinal products and drugs through the PDMP to prevent marijuana diversion. By implementing common sense measures to bolster physician requirements and to expand our sales monitoring system, we will take key steps toward limiting abuses of our medical marijuana program. As the only doctor in the Colorado General Assembly, I strive every day to ensure that health and safety are prioritized over profit in any of the industries that affect the health of Coloradans. Colorado has been a leader in the legalization of cannabis, and so we have a responsibility to follow up with this industry and ensure that we are a leader in protecting the health of our children and young people. Thank you very much.
Okay, Pat.
So, School of Public Health study, we don't have that data, but a lot of that seems to be pulling together the data that we do have. So, how much of that $1 billion do you see going for that program? How much do you see going for new research?
Yeah, it's a good question, Pat. So just the structure of the research is to conduct a meta-analysis of all the research that has happened around the entire world to allow the School of Public Health to do a meta-analysis to identify what gaps may exist. Now, the unique relationship that we've created with this research is to allow the legislature to continue to get updated on where that research is going. So by the end of this year, the School of Public Health will update the legislature, the relevant committees both in the House and the Senate, on what additional research gaps may exist. They will then spend some of those resources to start to fill in those gaps and then issue a report in July 2022 that goes down to a scientific research council that's made up of healthcare professionals. And that research council will take in the reports and make recommendations to the legislature. So the first important step that no one in the country has done is to do a meta-analysis of everything that's happened around the world, to take that in, to identify the gaps, and then to fill those gaps. Additional questions? Jesse? Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Jesse. One, I really want to thank the stakeholder process that's gone into this. Representative Geitner identified one key amendment that will come forward today for the 0 to 17 population, for the kids who have moved to Colorado, who are working with their parents to make sure they have access to their medicine. We want to make sure that they continue to have access. So you'll see an amendment today to make sure that that is crystal clear. We really are focusing in on the 18 to 20-year-old population in the diversion that's happening through that marketplace. Pat, one more, and then that's going to be the last question.
So the original version of this bill had a 50% cap on THC. Is that something that you think would come back, or like that?
Yeah, I can. I'll let Representative Caraveo take that if she wants. But again, we are moving forward with what we think is the most responsible Colorado approach. There are some who want us to go much further than we currently are. There's some that don't want us to do anything. And what you have in front of you is a well-crafted, collaborative bill that sets in motion the research that's needed and the process that's needed to make recommendations to the legislature, and then to cut down on the loopholes that we know exist in statute now, and to make sure that those practices can't continue. And so it's a well-balanced approach where we started. And again, I stood in the well of the House in 2015 and had a conversation with the General Assembly about my concerns on high potency. So we've come a long way. This is an ongoing conversation. I think this reflects the fact that Colorado is ahead of the rest of the country, but the rest of the country is going to be soon following our steps. Thank you guys all very much.